Yes, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this morning. My name is Floris Difficult, and next to me is Sophie Jellema, and we'll be hosting this webinar. But first, I would like to ask you, I hope you already grabbed your cup of coffee, and during the session, feel free to ask any questions in the questions box during the webinar. We'll answer these questions by the end of the session, and we would like to receive some feedback via the survey after the webinar, so please feel free to fill that in. Then I'll go to the next slide, because today's session is about analyzing the human factor, data on security awareness and behavior. And I'm very proud that today we'll host this webinar because it is, I think, one of the things that is still unraveled, measuring human security, and I think we cracked the corner there. My name is Floris Difficult. I'm the moderator of the session. I'm just checking if the slides go through. You didn't see that yet, but you're seeing them at the moment. I'm the market group manager of the behavior team, and together with a team of psychologists and project managers, we manage projects to measure and intervene on security behavior. But I think that Sophie is going to tell much more about that. Then I would like to tell something about Secura. Secura, as you probably know, is a digital security expert company since 2000, and our mission is to provide insight into your digital security. And I think that that mission is, especially for this morning, very relevant, because your research, Sophie, will be about insight into people's digital security. And our approach is to link security to international standards, metrics, and certifications, and in this case also to science, social science. We focus on people, process, and technology, and today, of course, will be about people security. So I would like to give the floor to you, and I would like to let you go.
All right, thank you, Floris, for this nice introduction, and hi to you all. Like Floris said, I will take you to the interesting world of the human side of cybersecurity today. And I'm really excited about this talk because today I get to present data. For those of you who know me, they know that I like to do research, and I like to study and investigate things. And I also like to validate my theories. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sophie. I'm a behavioral scientist, a psychologist, and some people might say a psychologist in cybersecurity. That's kind of strange. Well, to me it isn't, and that's for two reasons. Because straight after obtaining my degree in psychology, I switched to IT. And I did so because during my studies, I mainly did research. So I liked helping out patients, but I also really liked doing research. And what I really liked as well was programming my own research. So to me, it was a natural step shifting towards IT. And that's how I ended up working as a software test analyst. And during my time as a software test analyst, cybersecurity, that was part of my job. So I learned more about that, and I had loads of technical colleagues. And they developed technical measures to make sure that people worked safely. But if you develop loads of technical measures and make working really complex, then what are people going to do? They're going to go and take olifantenpaadjes, so shortcuts, and work around those measures. So send emails that are supposed to be contain work documents, send them to their private email so they can print at home, especially now that people are working from home so often. So what my technical colleagues forgot was the human side of cybersecurity. Because, and this is important to know, I want to add that when I say cybersecurity, I also mean information security. So it's also making sure that physical documents containing sensitive information are kept safe, and that unauthorized visitors, that they're addressed when they're on the premises. Let me get to the next slide. Because I've been talking to information security specialists for quite some time now, And they asked me things like security. We train and explain, and we tell people what to do, but then they don't do it. Or what's the best security awareness program? Should I reward or punish people? And you might recognize one or two of these questions. You might also have other questions. Please, like Flora said, put them in the chat so that we can discuss them during the presentation or maybe after, depending on how much time we have left. I'm actually really looking forward to your questions, because that's what I like best about presenting, having a discussion with the audience. But when it comes to these challenges, we see that people, although everybody has an idea on how people act, because we're people ourselves, we're humans ourselves, changing human behavior, it's not as easy as it may seem. What happens now most is that when I come at an organization, when people want to change behavior, the CISO, he or she goes and tells people what is expected of them. So employees, they get informed, they get instructed, and then they don't do it all the time. And then the conclusion is, people are the weakest link in cybersecurity. And that's according to me, that's a step too quick, because knowing what you desire from people, that's not the same as being able to influence their behavior, because that's the expertise of psychologists. So I studied human behavior and I learned how to make people change their behavior. So how do you make sure that people have a strong password, wear their badge, lock their computer? And like I said, it may seem easy because we are human ourselves and we have an idea on how human acts, how people act, but changing actual behavior, that's not that simple, because people are really complex and they're different. So the fact that we are human ourselves, that doesn't make us experts on human behavior. Actually, if you take a closer look, or if you put it the other way around, you're not asking me as a psychologist to configure a firewall. At least you shouldn't if you want it to work properly. So if you turn that around, it's actually pretty strange that we ask cybersecurity experts to change human behavior, and not just for one human, but for a whole organization. And so what we do at Secura, we know that these are two different disciplines, knowing about technical measures and knowing about behavior. And what we do is we combine these expertises, and that's really valuable, because when you work together, on the one hand, psychology learns from cybersecurity, and we learn a lot, because we learn what are the processes that are in place, what's the policy on information security, but also what technical measures are in place and what can we actually do when we make use of technology. And even on people, we learn a lot, because a CISO needs to tell me what he or she expects from their employees. The other way around, and that's of course what I'll be talking about today, is what can cybersecurity learn from psychology. And I like to go straight ahead to one of the main lessons of today. If not the main lesson of this webinar, people are not rational. But as I just said, we do have the tendency to aim all our efforts at awareness trainings. So we send knowledge because we rely on the assumption that people will act rationally. So once they know, they will act. But people are not computers. It's not how the world turns. If we look at daily life, there's plenty of examples where people know, keep apart, but don't do it. So don't park here, stick to the speed limit, don't use your phone whilst you're driving. And there's many of examples where people do know, but don't show the behavior. So that means that knowledge, knowing and awareness, that's, well, obviously it's necessary. You have to know before you can act, but it's not sufficient in itself. So knowing doesn't mean that people are actually going to do it. In other words, there's a gap between knowing what we should do and how we actually behave. And that's what we see in daily life in the examples I just showed. And the question, of course, is, do we also see that in cybersecurity? Well, I've been at many companies, and yes, there's many things I can tell you. For example, just 2 days ago, I did a social engineering assignment with my colleague Floris, and we were at a department where we definitely weren't supposed to be. And I walked around for nearly 15 minutes and people just smiled and waved at me. Of course, I was very polite and I smiled back. But if you ask me, that's not a case of people not knowing. They knew I wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't have the proper badges with me, but I was just nice. And so this is not a lack of knowledge. It's something else. But this is just my experience. And well, the scientist in me said you have to validate this. And that's what we did last summer. And today I'm going to present that data. First, the method. And before I go into that, actually, when we start a program for one of our clients to make their employees more resilient, cyber resilient, we start our SAFE program. And SAFE means security addressed for all employees. We start always with a measurement in which we measure security awareness, but also actual behavior. And this measurement, it's developed by a team of psychologists and security experts. The measurement, it consists of several steps. But for now, it's important to know, like I just said, that we measure knowledge and behavior. And we use these data to gain insight in the current status of a company. And that's very valuable because these numbers, they provide guidance in where you should put your efforts. And what we see sometimes, there actually is a lack of knowledge, as you will see in the data that I'll be showing you shortly. But once you've tested that, you know on which topics knowledge is lacking, and you can actually address the topics where knowledge is missing and not further bother people with information on topics that they already know. And in addition to knowledge, we also assess behavior, like I said. So we check what people know and we check what people do. Usually we do this for each customer separately, but last summer we had the opportunity to combine. We gathered a lot of data, and these companies, they allowed us to combine the data. So we have a huge data set, which is really interesting, and we could analyze overall effects. So what do? We send out a survey to 20 different healthcare organizations. That was hospitals, blood banks, but also institutes for home care, specialized nursing. And this resulted in 1,155 people filling out our survey and providing valid results, so fully filled out surveys. And how did we continue? We assessed ability first, so we assessed knowledge, and we did so on 15 topics, which were cybersecurity topics. So ISO, NIST was taken into account, and of course, since it was healthcare, also NEN was taken in account. And for each of these 15 topics, we had one knowledge question containing one right answer, 2 wrong answers, and people could also indicate that they didn't know the answer. And these questions weren't easy, so we were really assessing whether people knew. And in addition to assessing knowledge, we also asked them about their behavior. So after each knowledge question, we said, do you actually do this? And people could indicate whether they did on a scale from 1 to 5. 1 meaning never, 5 meaning always. There's a big side note to this measurement, because it's self-report. And that means that socially desirable answers are likely to be present. In other words, people, they tend to be more positive about their own behavior and match their answer according to what they think is expected of them. Well, in this case, that would mean that they report to behave safer than they actually do in real life. And if that's the case, then this would be less proof of my theory of the gap between knowledge and behavior. So the fact that I'm telling you this now so clearly that's a sneak peek into my findings. So yes, I am aware of the issue of self-report, but in this case, I think it makes the support for the theory even stronger. So now on to the results. One more thing that's interesting to tell, we also perform a real behavioral measurement. So we go on site and then we test what people actually do, but limited in time today. So today I'll be talking about self-reported behavior and awareness or knowledge. On average, on all the 15 topics, this is what we see. In 38% of the cases, people gave the wrong answer. But in 62%, they did know the right answer. So in approximately 40%, you should still tell people, give them knowledge, tell them what to do. This is an average. We also looked per topic. And then you see that there's big differences per topic. So some topics scored really well. There was a 96% score for one of the topics. So here, if you just look at awareness, you're there. People know. So you think you're done for this topic. Let me get back to that. There was also some topics where knowledge was actually missing. So there was one question where only 50% of the respondents knew the correct answer. So sometimes knowledge is the missing factor and you should provide knowledge. Sometimes clearly knowledge is not a problem at all. I could go into every single one of these topics, but again, time. So I'm going to present you the patterns that we saw. And what we saw is that the highest scores are on items that are most common sense. And with common sense, I mean, these are questions that you could ask on people on the street. So you don't necessarily have to work at a certain organization and still be able to answer the questions correctly. So people know they should leave their desk clean once they're done with their working day, or they should know that they do know that they have to lock their computer when they leave it unattended. And if we look at the lowest scores, that's the most technical or applied knowledge. Specifically, phishing is a challenge for people. Yes, people know about phishing. They think it's important, but if you ask them how exactly can you recognize a phishing mail, or how exactly do you know that a link is a safe link, that's what people find hard. So specific knowledge, that's where people still need learning. So now we know the highest and the lowest scores, and now we come to the interesting part. How about knowledge and behavior? So is there a gap between knowledge and behavior in cybersecurity? First results I want to share with you, they're on a very specific behavior, and that's locking PC screens. People know when they should lock their computer. They do mostly anyways, nearly 9 out of 10. So in terms of awareness, you're almost ready. 88% knows it. But now watch the gray bluish part. If we ask the people who know if they actually also lock their screen when they leave their computer unattended, only 42% says so. And this is self-report. So likely in real life, numbers would be lower. So even with self-report, less than half of the people who know it actually do it. Here's another example, strong passwords. 82% knows it. So 18% requires knowledge, but the rest of them, they know what a strong password is. But in terms of behavior, only 31% does it. So over half of our total sample, from which 82% knows what a strong password is, they still don't have a strong password themselves. So in this case, instructing people would only help for the red part, 80%. But for the other part, so the 51% that doesn't do it, explaining them again what a strong password is, that's not going to help them because they already know. So there you should go and do something else. Again, I could go over all topics, but that would take too much time. So I'm gonna tell you and show you this picture. There's difference again and big differences between topics. And this is way too much data for one slide. We'll be sharing these results later on if you want to. You have to send us an email. I'll come back to that. But for now, you can see that the red part, that's where people know it, but they don't do it. And that red part ranges from 10% to over half, so 54%. So that's a big difference. And of course, here we also looked for patterns, and what we see is that whenever a behavior can be enforced, people are obviously more likely to do it. So if you look at two-factor authentication, where people are supposed to use another means next to their password to log into an account, so for example, an SMS to your phone, there's a big chance that people will actually do it once they know it. So 60% in this case knows about 2FA and what it means, what the rules are. And if we ask them if they do it, nearly 50% says so. So only in 12% knowledge is present, but behavior isn't. Well, now let's look at a topic where enforcement is more difficult. Addressing a stranger without a badge, the thing I just said about 2 days ago when I was with Floris at this company where we could walk around. This is addressing a stranger in a non-public area, because obviously these were health institutions where it's normal that patients walk around, which are hard to, they're supposed to be there, that's okay. So here we specifically reformulate the question so that it was restricted areas, so where people really weren't supposed to be. 82% knew it. But if we ask people, do you actually address strangers and direct them to reception, for example, in a kind way, you don't have to kick them out, 28% does it. So over half, they know it, but they don't do it. And again, this is self-report, so actual numbers might be even lower. So big differences between the topics. What do we see on average? And this picture you already saw. So 38% doesn't know, 62% does know. So that means you need about 40% of your efforts put that into learning and trainings. But that doesn't mean that you're done here, because there's more to behavior than just knowing. If it comes to doing, and we ask that to people, then we see that on average 31% does it, meaning that the other 31% on average knows it but just doesn't do it yet, which means there's other factors driving behavior, and those factors you should identify. But first, let me come to this. I think that this is conclusive proof that also in cybersecurity, being aware, knowing isn't the same as safe behavior. And that's important because it teaches us that the goal of a security campaign should not be just awareness, because that 31% knows already, but they don't act. So that means that your goal should be safe behavior. And that brings us back to psychology, science of behavior, because what I'd like to show you now, that's a very fundamental theory on human behavior, is that behavior is more, and that cannot be a surprise to you by now, more than just ability or knowledge. It's also motivation and opportunity. And motivation is, do people want to perform the behavior? One example, there was this organization, they said to me, I want that people report incidents. But then I asked people, and they knew, because they've told people many times, people knew where they had to report. But when I asked people, why don't you do it? They told me, well, it's quite a hassle, and I've done it actually a couple of times, but I never heard back. So obviously it's not important. And if that's the reason for not showing behavior, then that's the thing that you want to address. And the same goes for opportunity. So an example here, people would actually have to be enabled to show the behavior. If I ask people to clean their desks after work and store their valuables and work valuables in a safe place, they have to have lockers or a drawer that can be locked to be able to show the behavior. So behavior is determined by more than just awareness or knowledge, because people are not rational. They're not computers. Behavior is determined by knowledge, motivation, and opportunity. And if you also take the other two into account, so motivation and opportunity, you also understand that interventions need to go beyond just educating people. Because if the barrier is with motivation, then you need to motivate them, obviously. And if they can do the behavior because there's no lockers, then you need to give them lockers and not tell them again that it's important to store their valuables safely. If you keep on doing so, you might even annoy people and make motivation go down even more to store their valuables safely. And actually, this is not just for cybersecurity. This goes for any behavior. So also for household chores. If you want to try this at home, feel free. In our survey, we also, of course, measured motivation. So we did loads more research, which I can continue on, but I see that my time is actually up. So I'm going to continue to this slide. If you want to learn more, please follow us on LinkedIn, on our Safe page, or on the Secura page, because we post regularly about these topics. And if you want to receive the actual numbers that were presented today, please send us an email to safe@secura.com. If there's any other questions, also please send us an email. And I'd like to thank you for your time and for watching. And I've Floris back here.
Thanks, Sophie, for this interesting insights. And luckily, we also got some questions from the audience, because I think what you said, the bridge between knowing what you need to do and actually doing it, is something that well, the audience also sees in their organizations. And one of the questions is that someone says is 100% is not achievable, 100% security is not achievable. So how to strike the right balance between efforts and outcome and a certain protection level? So how many efforts do you take to get your people to a point that you
Very nice question, and one I get often, actually. So thank you. Thank you for the one who was asking this question. Strike the right balance. Well, balance is the crucial word here, actually, because it's always about balance. You want to make things workable, but also keep them safe. So you want to make sure that people don't go and use those olifantenpaadjes. And that's one part. The other part is knowing where to put your efforts. And for that, you really need to measure where you stand. So you need the numbers that I just presented for these healthcare organizations. You want to know that for your own organization. So you want to know how your people score on knowledge, where knowledge is lacking or where it's already there. So you're not going to tell them again. You want to know if people are motivated for these topics, and you want to know if they're actually able to show the behavior within your organization. And once you know that, you can develop a program. And of course, we help our customers by developing these kinds of programs. So if you want to know more, please send us an email.
So in the end, you say that 100% security is not achievable, but if you measure first before you intervene, so you don't start with just a communication campaign and sending knowledge, then you can strike the right balance between or a better balance between efforts.
I think that's the crucial thing. Yeah, a better balance, or the best balance for your company, because like I said, 100%, that's, I think I've never seen it.
No, it's well, it's not achievable, and I think that your how do you say it? The examples from other real life where people's behavior, people know what they need to do. They know they need to drive 100 kilometers an hour on the highway,
but still
they don't do it. So you see that with security behavior as well. But I think that from an organizational perspective, you
want to try and do your best. And I think you can do your best once you know where the barriers are for your organization.
Yeah.
So that's what you want to know.
The next question is from someone who thanks for the presentation, but will you be publishing these results as a scientific paper as well?
Thank you. I think I know who is asking this question, and we have some intention to do that. We're still working on it. We did write them down in an article. It will actually be 3 separate articles. So one about this knowledge behavior gap, one about motivation, and one about opportunity as well. And they'll be published by December, I think, the 1st out of 3. I'm not completely sure, but once they're there, we'll definitely share a post on this. So please follow us.
All right. And I have another question from someone who's interested in phishing. You mentioned that in one of the slides as well. Some organizations, they start a phishing campaign to test their employees, and then they say, hey, so many clicks, and what do we need to do next? I think what is the answer is what do people need to do next?
What do people need to know next? Well, it really depends on how you went about your phishing campaign, because it's really easy to make a really complex phishing email, send it out to everyone, and get high click rates. But I think in the end, your goal is to train people and to enable them to recognize mails like this, potential phishing mails, and report those mails, because that's what's going to help your IT or security department. So depending on the goal of your phishing campaign, which ideally is we enable and we're not gonna annoy our employees getting the highest scores in the click scores. Once you know what triggers people to click, then you can address that. So develop phishing campaigns in which you test for different drivers, so to say, or different red flags. So one, you focus on time pressure, one you focus on CEO or CFO fraud when it comes to finance, and that's how you can go about this, to really single out what makes your employees click and subsequently enable them to tackle these challenges. And also for phishing, I would always say it's going to happen. So when we develop a phishing campaign, I just need one person to enter their login details. That's enough for me to get into your system. So you want everyone to be on their toes, to respond in the right way. And that also means that even if they're really smart about this, if they know a lot, there's always time pressure. So there's always someone who is going to click. And if that happens, you want them to act quickly and go and tell you, so you can take the right measures and warn the rest of the organization and do some log research, so you can prevent damage and prevent new incidents.
Right, and I think one of the things you also mentioned was some organizations use phishing to increase motivation in their organization to report an incident, or that they have to be alert. I don't want to link it to one of the questions in the question box, but I think maybe it does link very well, because what is a good strategy for increasing motivation? You talked about increasing knowledge, increasing motivation, increasing the opportunity, so the steering wheel from out the organization to facilitate.
Yeah.
But this question of someone is about what is a good strategy for increasing the motivational part.
Motivation. Thank you. Motivation, I'd say, is one of the hardest things to increase. And that's hard because if you go about it in a general way, it's hard to get there. So you want to know what at the moment is actually keeping people from showing the behavior when it comes to motivation. So you're going to ask them, and you're just going to ask them why, and even ask that 5 times. So, Floris, why are you not reporting incidents right now? Because I've told you, and we have this button that you have to click on. It's easy. Why are you still not reporting incidents?
Well, because of time. Well, actually, at first, of course, I have to say I always report my incidents, but because the procedure is too long, you hear a lot of different examples. I was in a meeting and I got the phishing mail, so I was actually about to present the webinar in 5 minutes, so I didn't have time to report it. Then there's a lot of stress factors that can happen there. So. Yeah. There's always excuses for things not to do, so that's why it's also very interesting to see how what you can do to increase motivation. So I think and that's what you explained.
Yeah.
There's one more other question, and the question is: do you expect the same results and conclusions to hold in more technical areas like secure code development, do not check credentials into version control? So if you would have a technical measurement as well to get these insights.
Do you mean if we replicate this or send out this survey in a more technical company?
Yeah.
Or, okay. Well, there's behavior everywhere. And knowledge, I expect, would be higher, especially for the specific topics that we saw just now, scored lower. But then if people still don't do it whilst they know it, it's still behavior. So you can still look at what is the motivation, or are people not able to show the behavior because of lack of time?
Yeah.
Like Floris just said. So yes, I think it won't be the exact same results, but it will be really valuable also for a technical organization to just do such a measurement.
Okay. So in the end, you say the gap between what people are actually doing and what people need to do will always remain.
If you focus your efforts purely at awareness, yes, there's going to be a gap.
Okay.
Because it's more than just awareness.
All right. Well, then I think it's very clear that you shouldn't focus only on awareness, and also
I'm not against awareness, but that's thank you for reminding me this way. I'm not against sending knowledge, but I only recommend sending knowledge once it's actually knowledge that is missing. So don't go on telling people again what they already know.
All right. Thank you, Sophie. I see that these were the few questions that were asked. If there's any other questions, please, you have 5 more seconds to the
5 more seconds.
the stress factor to pose these questions. Otherwise, I would like to thank you very much for the presentation. Also, the audience to thank for. I see there's one more other question coming in from someone who's working in a technical organization. And he says, I can tell you people know more but act less securely compared to a non-technical organization.
Well, that's interesting to know. So knowledge is even better, but then is it motivation or opportunity? So please send us an email and ask us to watch along with you.
Yeah, it might also be very interesting to
compare results, especially to healthcare, I think, because it's not their core business for most people to attend to cybersecurity. It's just on top of their regular work, which is obviously now extra. Well, there's a shortage of hands and beds now again.
Yeah.
So there's other things in place. So it will be really interesting to compare across different fields. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I think that's the end of the webinar. More information will be, I think, also shared with the attendees because we have the data to share. You might use it for purposes
within
of
your own company,
in your own organization.
Yep. Feel free.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you, Sophie, again. And then I would like to end this webinar and wish you a very nice and pleasant day.
Thank you.